What creates the difference between the mind and consciousness? I think that a great deal of my time as a proclaimed conscious individual has been in reference to thought and not consciousness itself. The overthought turned realistic thinking or profession is not what it means to be conscious. In some ways, I think that some parts of consciousness must be like at least metaphysical, if anything, because everything is grounded in the real, like empirically and scientifically, and what we are or how we think or how we express identity and self has nothing to do with the physical. There was a analogy by some, I think Sartre, philosopher. It's like the mill argument, where if you were able to size up a machine that was capable of doing everything a human could or something of that sort, you could go in, like theoretically, you can make this machine big enough that you can go inside and you would never be able to see anything that explained consciousness. I think it's something that has to have no material applications in order for it to be instantiated in a physical world, because it's kind of the contradiction. And when I say like non-physical, non-material, I mean actions other than the ones taken by our physical bodies, which is driven in some sense by what we're conscious of. It's all cyclic in the sense that both mind and what we perceive consciousness to be are working in a like constant upheaval and a constant battle that contradicts each other. You know, they don't work together often at all. Within like matters of perspective, once we become conscious of our own, we have to somewhat neglect our physical senses and feelings as it pertains to the event of a reference. So we need to determine whether or not like our first prescribed perspective is any part grounded in reality. But I view feelings and thought as simply like products of our subconscious, the imprints of our consciousness, things that we tend to loom over or accept as our reality rather than question in the day to day. It is in our subconscious where our perception of the world truly lies. It is the imprint of our acceptance of how things are, which is why it all loops back. What is real? You know, who is even in a position to answer that question realistically? I think that a lot of what is real and a lot of the fact that we accept is just group belief. And that's not to say that some things aren't positive and real. Like if I set something on fire, the fire's got to spread. And the facts like that aren't necessarily like the same as what I'm positing. Like some stuff empirically makes sense, but that doesn't, like the absence of evidence isn't the evidence of absence. Just because something isn't perceivable by the senses does not make it, not exist or something. And just because we are able to grasp it with our senses does not posit that the things that we are able to contain are grounded in any reality. What we are is the entire experience, not just a small piece. We often romanticize ourselves in parts of events and bury them into our subconscious as if they are the grounds for our entire belief. We are the whole thing and everything. The only person in the lives we live that is able to make any change or make any imprint or difference is ourselves, ultimately. We hold the tools that we need in order to sculpt ourselves, but the objective is not to finish the artwork. For once you finish this art and finish who you are and finish sculpting this person you want to be, that's the second you're open to critics and criticization. And it's hard to be done with your piece of art and then show it to the world and then have it be criticized and not take it personal. So the thing to do is to always view yourself as a art in progress. You're always sculpting, always changing things to make it better. So people aren't going to look at a half built sculpture and say that sculpture is going to be bad, because they can never truly determine which way it was. And if they do, that's an assumption of their own mind, and they have no justification, no grounds, or no foundation, and they're just speaking from their own assumptions. It has nothing to do with you, but more to do with them. Life is the journey, the doing, the event containing all causes and effects referenced all at once. It is like the archer aiming, and being the aim for hitting the target is his goal and tends to cause him joy or satisfaction. In that way, he is projecting himself into the target and in turn is becoming it. A lot of times we tend to project our own consciousness and project our whole idea of self and who we are into events and places and people. Like we determine our own self-worth typically by determining how we interact with others in comparison to others rather than ourselves. It's these projections of the self that allow you to have some type of empathy, but also being able to attain anything from any event. It's that part of ego that allows you to feel. It's the identification with self that allows you to feel that type of pain as well. But in that way, it is a necessary something, but it's not something that we should always like push forth as if it's necessary. The nonsense of the mind is simply just a false pretext of the subconscious. You know, some people are brought up in environments that lack the proper tools and necessities in order for anybody to, attain any sense of identity that is besides, what they've been shown. And typically in those situations, we fail to somewhat realize that, you're not always exactly what you first taught you were. Because most people don't really most people say don't gain consciousness. They're like older and they lack the ability to really have that sort of introspection, and everything is simply just perspective, and that disables them from being able to decipher what's real and what's not, because everything's going to seem real because you only are able to appeal to your own senses rather than feel anything different or try to reach beyond what is known and what you've kind of refused in, bird your comfort in, rather than expanding it and determining the grounds of your own belief. We also have to be very intent on how we want ourselves to be. Like with reference to the analogy about the sculptor being the object of the sculpting, you have to have at least some idea in mind of what you want yourself to be. Otherwise, you may take into account too many people's suggestions. Once you're in the middle of the building, someone's not going to be like, oh, I think you should make it this way. And if you had no intent in mind, you're probably going to go along with it. It's the allowance of other people into your conscious, or the lack of self-image that creates the possibility and the tangibility of others to make yours how they view it. We need to have a distinct foundation. Otherwise, we're going to just become the product of other people's viewpoint rather than the view of ourselves. You have to be the self in order to do anything for the self. Before you do anything, you must have first be something. To do anything of value, you must first be something of value.